Good morning, all. It's really my privilege to be able to speak to you. Please feel free to stop me anytime during the talk itself. Don't hold your questions. Okay, though the questions have been slated towards the end, but I don't. I let it be more an interactive session rather than a monologue for the first 40 minutes and then a dialogue after that. It is better that we have a dialogue from the beginning. Okay. So let us start with this. I think the topic which Professor Bharat and Vinay asked me to talk about was entrepreneurship and innovation in the context of new educational policy. And also they asked me to touch upon the startup ecosystem. Okay. So that was this thing behind this talk. So I'll start with a quote. Our real illiteracy today is our inability to create. Why do I make such a bold, unfortunate statement? It is true because the number of research papers which are coming out of India are absolutely low. Okay, we hardly produce around about 18 to 20 research paper per lakh of people, compared to say 800 per lakh of people in Israel. Okay, and almost 450 per lakh of people in USA, and even in China they produce around about 90 to 100 research papers per lakh of people. So unfortunately, the research ecosystem in India is still not, up to the global standards. Okay. Why is it happening? How we can improve the system? It's a long debate. We can get into that as we go through the discussions. Okay. But one thing is sure, that the learning is a lifelong process. Learning doesn't start in the college and learning doesn't end in college. So the only people who will always come up in life or contribute to the society more than coming up is a negative word. I think the people who contribute to the society are those who always learn, unlearn, and relearn. Okay, so that is the constant which remains. So let us go through the discussion today and see, understand the context of innovation, entrepreneurship, and how is the startup ecosystem in India and things like that. So if you look at the commerce value chain in any commerce, okay, it's not e-commerce. I'm talking about commerce. Commerce is the business of business, right? There is a buyer. So if a buyer wants to buy something, we search, okay, we make a choice, and then we buy, and then we make the decision of buying, and then we pay, and then either we get the delivery or we take the delivery. Okay, this is the value chain. Simple, right? Now, from a seller's perspective, he obviously has to segment which market he wants to sell to, how much he can personalize the product or service, how he can differentiate, and how he can close the deal, which is very important, and how he can collect the money at the end of the day. This is the selling value chain. And obviously, there are other things in the whole process like supply chain management, regulation, customer service, etc., etc. So this is the value chain. At the end of the day, in the entire business, these three are important: buying, selling, and managing the supply chain. These three are very important. But now what is happening is, with digital, internet, etc., etc., the channels are getting extended. That means you are not limited by geography, either in terms of access or finding the buyer. Okay, either in terms of finding the seller or finding the buyer, you are not limited anymore. So the channels have become extended. And it has also reduced the time to process, because you can make payments at the click of a button, and you can find your suitable seller at the click of a button. You can find your buyers at the click of a button. So what is helping is obviously the data analytic models, the discovery, enhanced customer engagement. Customer engagement is becoming more and more, and you are able to understand the buying behavior, which products, which people most are buying, which products are less buying, and stuff like that. And the access to capital has become a lot more, okay, which is essentially bridging the gap between the provider and the seeker. Okay, the access to capital is really the amount of capital available in India today for entrepreneurship is pretty high. We'll come to that. So essentially, if this value chain doesn't move at a particular speed or a higher speed, the jobs will not get created. So that means the more the people buy, the more the people sell, the more the people collect, the more the people invent, the more the people come out with new products, that is when the entire commerce value chain becomes accelerated, and it is the accelerated value chain which creates jobs. Why we had in pandemic very less number of jobs or jobs lost? Because the velocity of the commerce became slower. Okay, the moment the velocity is higher, the number of jobs get created are higher. That's why, for example, India for the past 23 years, we had a fairly good run in terms of GDP growth. Constantly, we are growing on average between 6 to 8%, plus or minus 1 or 2% here across the government. Okay, so to that extent, because the GDP is growing at a fairly rapid pace, the number of jobs which got created also got accelerated. For example, when I passed out of my college way back in 1983-84, we had a campus recruitment and only 3 people were selected from the campus in my campus. Today, when I go to my BTech campus, I find that at least 150 out of the 180 students get absorbed in the first 3 days. It's phenomenal amount of job growth which has happened over the last 20-25 years. But still, the amount of jobs which needs to be created are a lot more for various reasons. And what creates jobs? It is essentially entrepreneurship. And what leads to entrepreneurship? It is the inventions or innovations. So those are the fundamental driving factors, okay, which create jobs and which kind of accelerate the growth of economy. And why does it need a regulation? Because people by nature want to maximize their profits, and the moment profit maximization starts, obviously people start start doing some unhealthy practices, and hence it needs regulation. So regulation is important, and capital is important, and innovation is important, and entrepreneurship is important. These 4 are extremely important for the commerce value chain to grow at a higher pace. This is the fundamental thing. Now let us understand a little bit of, I'm going a bit slow. I'll accelerate it as we go through the discussion. The digital economies are on the rise. The digital economy itself will be $1 trillion in India by 2025. $1 trillion is $1,000 billion, and $1,000 billion, as you know, is around about 7,000 into 7,000 crores. So that is the kind of economy we are talking about. Okay, so the digital economies are on the rise, and automation, more and more automation is also happening. So that may lead to erosion of jobs in manufacturing and low-end jobs, but it may give rise to jobs in the higher value chain and digital economy and stuff like that. And consumer spending led economies are gaining importance. What do I mean by consumer led spending economies? Essentially, if you look at China and India now, the economies are growing at a pretty high pace because we are consumer led. In fact, the people are telling that the next 30-40 years will be led by Asia, and the center of gravity of the economy in the world will shift from left of Atlantic to right of Kashmir. That's what people say. Okay, and it is true. People are predicting that 1/3 of the unicorns means any company which has potential to have 1,000 crore market capitalization is called unicorn. Okay, the people are telling that, projecting that 1/3 of the unicorns will come from Asia. So it is going to be Asia-led economy globally. For example, just let us take one emerging sector like fintech. Almost $50 billion worth of capital is flowing into fintech. 2/3 of the people are becoming online. And if you have $50 million today, you can start a bank in India. Okay, the policy is also changing. The government is also moving at quite a bit of a pace, again across the parties, okay, to facilitate the growth of economy. And the much more positive things which are happening are the startup ecosystem is becoming very, very open, and it is becoming a kind of an ecosystem kind of an approach. So last but not the least is that the entire economy is going to be data led. So data is becoming very, very important, and it is going to be the new oil of the economy. Most of you would have heard of it. I'm not going into too much of statistics. I'm just putting up these charts. These are going to be the drivers. Now let us get into the crux of the presentation, okay, which is essentially, this is just the introduction. The crux of the presentation is, let us understand what is entrepreneurship and what is innovation and what is the context of new educational policy, how is it facilitating it. Now people say entrepreneurship is about innovation, or is it about knowledge, or is it about business, or is it about the team, or is it about the leadership, is it about the ability to manage risk, is it about having vision? Yeah, it is all of this, but there is one thing missing in this. I mean, if you guys observe, Okay, what is missing in this chart is essentially this. One needs to see that spark in an idea. Okay, you should have an idea. We didn't see idea here, right? Did you see idea anywhere in this? For example, the vision and research may lead to an idea, but you should have that spark. And where does that spark come from? Let us look at that spark. Where does it come from? So let us understand the difference between what is classical business management versus what is entrepreneurship. If I become a vice president in one of the multinational companies, I am at best doing classical business management. I am not an entrepreneur, okay? But entrepreneurship is slightly different, and it is some portions of classical business management. All of you are business MBA students, so or you would have studied some sections of MBA. So to that extent, you understand what is classical business management. Classical business management is about having a product or a service to meet a customer need. Bata produces shoes to meet the need of wearing chappals for a common man. That is, there is a product or a service to meet a customer need. And there is, a need to manage the skilled workforce, the guy who manufactures the shoes, the guy who can sell the shoes, the guy who can do accounting, blah, blah, blah. And then there is a business plan. Every year, the top executives in Bata will have to, I took a Bata example because it's a very commonly known example. I could have taken Infosys or Wipro or anybody as an example. So you need to make a business plan. Okay, what will be my revenue? What will be my growth? How much will I increase my sales? How much will I increase my profitability? And how am I going to change my pricing? What are the schemes I'm going to introduce? This is classical business management. Okay. And I need to manage the operations, the supply of leather, the manufacturing of shoes, the volumes I'm going to produce, and the volumes I'm going to let in the retailers, the volumes I'm going to give it to the wholesalers, blah, 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 and all that. But what is entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurship you may have a business plan, but you need to start with an idea, and you need to have a product or a service which is being underserved or which is unserved customer need. For example, how did Ola came into picture? Ola came into picture because all of us had a need to avail taxi services, but unfortunately, we just knew the 4 guys who were operating near our house to hire a taxi. And if that fellow had already engaged all the 4 taxis, and a fellow so I live in Jayanagar, okay, for example, I know 4 taxi providers in Jayanagar, and the fellow in Baswangudi, I don't know, I cannot discover, and he may have 5 empty taxis without being utilized, but there was no way I could know about it. So there was an underserved need. It was not unserved, but it was an underserved need for me to discover a taxi fellow and use it for my service. So Ola took birth because there was an underserved need. Or if there is an unserved need, the delivery of vegetables online was an unserved need. So, we could get vegetables or fruit from nearby shop, but nobody was delivering to my house. So if there is an underserved need or an unserved need, or you are enhancing customer convenience, the GPS is an excellent example of enhanced customer convenience. If I have to go from here to Malleshwaram, always, if I'm a fresher if I'm a newcomer to Bangalore, I'll have to ask somebody in Jayanagar how to go. She will say you'll have to go up to Corporation Circle. Then somebody will say, no, you have to go up to Majestic. Then somebody will say, no, from Majestic, you have to take a right turn and go towards Malleshwaram. So at least at 5-6 points, I have to take a stop and ask somebody if I'm a newcomer to the city. But now with GPS, it has enhanced my convenience to find the route on my own. So if there is an underserved or an unserved need, that's when entrepreneurship starts. So you should have an idea. You should be able to form a team.
कुछ नहीं डायरेक्ट भाई 3 दिन पहले अभी तो बोल रहा है तुम मत आओ अभी मतलब हम लोग बताएंगे बोलेंगे कल से अभी बोल रहा है ऑफलाइन एग्जाम ठीक है 3 दिन के पहले अभी 9 तारीख को बोल रहा है ऑफलाइन एग्जाम.
No, sir, can we mute
5 दिन में
the interruption?
वो भी टेस्ट चाहिए तो घर से पेरेंट्स से.
No, sir, can we mute the interruptions?
मैंने बोला खुद कर लेगा मुझे क्या बोल रहा है खुद कर लेगा मुझे क्या बोल रहा है.
Professor, can we mute these interruptions?
Yeah, sir. 1 minute, sir. Yes, sir. You can proceed.
Okay. I'm sorry for that.
Yeah, sir.
I didn't know that you were there in the group, and so I was a bit.
No, sir, no.
We need to the fundamental thing which is needed for an entrepreneurship is entrepreneur is to mobilize finances. If you cannot mobilize finances, it's going to be a challenge, and it should have this idea or the product which you introduce should have differentiation. Okay, and you should be able to project the future market needs and the share, etc., etc. But it also has the classical elements of a business plan and a vision of increased sales and mobilizing operations, etc., etc. So the key needs of an entrepreneur are: you should have an idea, you should be able to design a product or a service around that idea, you should be able to bootstrap finance, which is extremely important. In a running business, you don't need to bootstrap, and you should be able to differentiate. These are the four fundamental differences. So now let us continue this idea of what is entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship can be expansion of an inherited business. It need not be that you always need to have an idea. Okay. For example, Mr. Premji inherited the vegetable oil products business, but he expanded into IT business. So it could be an expansion of an inherited business, or it could be new in it in a traditional business, or it could be a new way of doing an old business. Okay. For example, provisioning taxis for all of us was an old business, but it was a new way of doing that old business. Or it could be an incremental value add business. Okay. See, for example, Bata getting into say t-shirts and other things is a incremental value add business. Okay. You may not call it fully entrepreneurship, but it has few elements of entrepreneurship. So, or it could be an absolutely new business area. Okay. Something like Paytm. Paytm came as a digital payment. Payments were there through banks and others, through checks and others, but it's an absolutely new way of doing business. So entrepreneurship need not be mistaken only for starting an Ola or starting a Paytm. It can be expanding an existing business, or it could be an incremental value add business as well. So there are 5 types. Everywhere entrepreneurship is required. In fact, entrepreneurship is required even if you are working within an organization. You can be an intrapreneur. Okay, I may be doing just IT services business in India. I may go to my chairman and say that, hey, let's expand to US because US is a new geography. Then I need to think through who are the first set of customers I need to go to, how should I price my services, where will I put my resources, how will I mobilize the money, how will I convince the CFO, blah, blah, blah. That is entrepreneurship. So to that extent, entrepreneurship has got much more expanded definition. And why entrepreneurship is important, especially for aspiring people like you, because you are your own boss. You have your own business and hence you are your own boss. And it's a possibility of a higher rewards. It is possibility, not necessarily. It is not always assured because only 1 out of 10 entrepreneurs always succeed, especially in the new age technologies. In the old age businesses, people succeed even 1 out of 3 and 1 out of 4. And you are in charge of total operations. You cannot say that if you as a fresh MBA, if you go and join in Infosys, people will say, okay, you get into marketing. And people will say, no, you do digital marketing. In digital marketing, people may say, no, you do only search and consumer behavior analysis. So then you are getting narrowed in your specialization, which is good, nothing wrong in it. But if you're an entrepreneur, you're in charge of total operations. You need to think where to take the space, how to mobilize the supply, the raw material, how to position the product, etc., etc. And you need to build equity. You don't have an equity, you don't have a brand. You need to raise the value of equity, and you have macroeconomic parameters as the limits. It is nothing else is the limit. It is your own ability and macroeconomic parameters. Like suppose you had a COVID, then some of the entrepreneurs could not succeed despite their best abilities. And you are not as necessarily only a job creator, you are a value creator. That is fundamental difference as to when you get into entrepreneurship. Okay. Now, I think let us leave the academic portion of it. Let us understand how much of entrepreneurship kind of grown in India over the last few years, and what is happening in India. For example, if you look at the startup ecosystem, I took 2019 figures because these are vetted out figures and these have come from NASSCOM. So to that extent, otherwise what you see sometimes in press, either sometimes it's an exaggerated number or a diesel rated number, depending upon who is supporting the government and who is not supporting the government. So it's better to take through a third party industry channel like NASSCOM and project the numbers. Okay, as of end of 2019, there were at least 9,300 startups in India. And on an average, 1,500 to 2,000 startups are getting added every year, which is very good. Okay, so the startup ecosystem has started flourishing quite a bit. And the cumulative valuation, if you look at it in India in 2019, it was around about $55 billion. But actually, in my view, if they unlock some of the things like UPI and others, which are IRCTC, which is in the public sector domain, I think the valuation will easily cross $100 to $125 billion. And now everybody is getting into these digital economies, like, Reliance is getting to Reliance JioMart, and, Tatas are planning to get into health tech in a quite big business. I'm sure they are going to, unleash at least $100 to $150 billion worth of companies in the marketplace, which will command that kind of a valuation. Okay, so the valuations are growing, okay, definitely, and we'll have at least $500 billion valuation companies by 2023 or 2024, and it can easily reach up to $1 trillion, say, by 2026, 27. If we did not have the pandemic, we would have had even much earlier. Okay, and the number of unicorns, which I told you, are already around about 30-40 unicorns are there in India. Okay, some are soonicorns. Soon means very soon they will be unicorns. So unicorns are at least today around about 7. Every year the 7 to 10 are getting added. You would not have even heard of some of these names like Dhruva. You would have heard of Big Basket. Okay, Delivery, some might have heard, some might not have heard, iCertis and things like that. But they're all 1,000 crore valuation companies. Okay, and I'm not getting into other statistics because I'm going to share this presentation. You can go through the statistics. And they are leveraging opportunities across sectors. It's not necessarily limited to only, say, retail or e-commerce and things like that. There are quite a bit of thing is getting into fintech, which is hard, which is very, very emerging space. For example, just last year, around about $3 to $4 billion got invested in fintech. Okay. Similarly, in automotive, which again, we've already seen Olas of the world and things like that. Education is going to get a lot of importance, especially with new education policy, which I'm going to touch upon. I guess I have another 25-30 minutes to cover my rest of my slides. So let me see how soon I can, kind of cover this. Health tech is gaining importance. So essentially, it is across sectors. It's not necessarily only in retail and e-commerce, which we hear of, because they get prominence because they get branded easily. And a lot of consumer. For example, if you just take fintech, these are all various companies: Paytm, Cred, okay, Acco in the insurance space, Incred is in the microfinance and the SME financing, BharatPe is in the payment space. So in India itself, there are so many companies, okay, in just fintech alone. And globally, of course, there are at least 67 fintech unicorns valued at $250 billion globally. Okay, so the spaces. I just took one example. There will be similar charts for health tech and other things, things like. And what are the key trends which have been enabling the Indian startup ecosystem? There are a lot of startup hubs which have been started both by industry bodies like NASSCOM and a lot of corporate companies like Microsoft and Cisco and others, and a lot of private venture capitalist accelerators. So there are accelerators which kind of nurture, which kind of provide mentorship, and the moment you have an idea and you have a small team and you have invested some capital and you have 1 or 2 customers, these accelerators are ready to take you under their belt and hone you. For example, I am the mentor for one of the accelerators called Gain. Okay, I'm the lead mentor for the fintech ecosystem there, and so I'm also advising a couple of startups. So the thing is, the growth of new startups hubs is accelerating the ecosystem. The second thing is the increased breadth of sectors, which we already talked about, and deep technology is getting diffused. What are the deep technologies? Artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data analytics, blah, 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 and all of that. And building on UNI's digital infrastructure. For example, Government of India has released what is called as an India Stack, which has Aadhaar and consent manager, concepts like digital locker. These you will understand once you start understanding what is India Stack. It essentially provides a stack around which applications can be built. Okay, things like that. Okay, so Government of India is also building a lot of stacks in other areas like health tech. They have released what is called as a National Digital Health Mission. Okay, they have also released a stack for urban applications. It's called Digital India Urban Stack or something like that. They also released a stack for education. Okay, so like that, a lot of stacks are there. People can leverage it, and similarly, higher corporate participation. Everywhere, as I told you, Microsoft, everybody has started accelerator programs. They are participating. Investor landscape is increasing, and a lot of people are doing second innings. People like me, we have started our second innings in the startup ecosystem. Otherwise, I was in corporate career for 33 years. Now I'm in my second innings. I'm more on doing startups and mentoring startups, investing in one or two small startups and things like that. And a lot of ex-Infosys people are doing investment because they are rich. Because Infosys people had the stock options and they became rich. Unlike people like me, we did not have so much of stock options, so we did not become rich. That's okay, that's a different story. And a lot of products are getting built in India and getting branded globally. Okay, so we already talked about this. There are some mature sectors in the startup, and there are some emerging sectors like fintech, agriculture, health are all emerging. And mature sectors are like mobility and automotive and retail and things like that. Okay? And the growth of startup hubs, which we already talked about earlier, only Bangalore, Mumbai, and Delhi were the hubs. But now you see Hyderabad, Chennai, cities like Kanpur, cities like, every other city, trying to become a startup, Jaipur and all, trying to be Trivandrum, etc., trying to become startup hubs, and they are trying to nurture the ecosystems. This is what I was talking about, India Stack. India Stack is the government of India Stack, which people can use and things like that. I'm not going to get into all of this. So it's just that UPI provides, UPI is doing a lot of transactions in payments, things like that. So we'll get into more meaty topics as we go along. And almost 20 to 25% of the startups are leveraging emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, big data analytics, blockchain, augmented reality, virtual reality, and things like that. So essentially, just to summarize, there is a good ecosystem. Okay, the investments are growing, and a lot of new sectors are emerging, and there are good digital infrastructure which is available. So it's just for people to jump in and leverage some of these things which are happening in the marketplace. But it is not everything is hunky-dory. Okay, there are a lot of challenges. Okay, a lot of young guys like you will not have market awareness, so you need to spend a lot of time in understanding the markets quite a bit. And there is an uncertainty of environment. Nobody is going to write a check just like that. People have to struggle for minimum 2 to 3 years by the time somebody blinks an eye. Okay, so you know that there are two philosophies of growth in life, right? Let us get into a little bit of philosophy of life. What is called as a monkey philosophy, and another is a cat philosophy. Monkey doesn't carry its kitten, okay, whereas cat carries its kitten. All of us are used to evolving through a cat philosophy, where somebody is hand-holding. Whereas in a monkey philosophy of growth, the newborn monkey latches onto the elder monkey. Okay, the elder monkey grows on its own path. Whereas it teaches its kitten or equivalent of its children to latch on and come along with it. I think what is important for an entrepreneur is to follow the monkey philosophy of growth. You have to know whom to latch on to and how to latch on to and how to grow in life. Whereas all the public sectors and the state governments and even the large private sectors, they encourage the cat philosophy of growth. Hey, you don't worry, I'll nurture you, I'll hold you through my mouth and I'll carry you through the life. Whereas in entrepreneurship is all about monkey way of growth. Okay, so you'll find a lot of uncertainty. Nobody is going to give you appointments. Nobody will give you, is going to buy your product at the first go. Things like that. And cash flow is going to be an extremely important challenge. Either when you mobilize funds through your family and friends, they are going to exhaust you at best after 6 months. And afterwards, how do you survive? How do you ensure that you get your first customer and move fast? Is going to be extremely important. And it is always a team effort. Yes, the solo entrepreneurs are mostly in inherited businesses. Okay, you can't find. It is very difficult for an individual because every individual is limited by your thinking, his own thinking, or his or her thinking. So they have to be questioned. They have to be an alternative viewpoint has to be there, and the team should have passion around the idea, which is a very, very, very important. All the venture capitalists are going to fund the teams and the passion around the idea more than the idea itself, quite a few times. Okay, and difference between what you think and what world thinks. You think that you have a great idea, but world thinks that it's a bloody useless idea. Okay, so I mean, you'll find all these challenges. It's not going to be so easy. And there is a saying that today's innovation was yesterday's sacrilege. Yesterday, whoever discarded those ideas, today they are hailed as innovators. Okay, so you will always find this, that people are not going to accept you, hug you, and kiss you, and say, "Hey, come in. I'll buy your product or service, or I'll put money into your company." It's a very tough journey for 36 months at least. And if you are prepared for the long haul, then get into it. Otherwise, it's not such an easy journey. Okay. And that's why I thought I'll take you through this funding cycle. Okay. Typically, it's a valley of death. This is called valley of death in the beginning, where you don't have a revenue. And some angels may like your idea and put money, or some may not put. And the seed capital. And this is where most of the startups die. Almost 80 to 85% of the startups die in this phase. And then once you have proven your product or a service, and once you have some early customers and you have huge potential to go, some early stage customers may come. Sorry, early stage investors may come. Both even customers and investors may come at that stage. So you will go through first round, second round, and third round, and that is when you will reach a mezzanine kind of this thing. Okay, now I can brand my business, and I can stand in the market on my own terms. That's when late stage investors come in. And once late stage investors come in, late stage investments are typically between 10 to $20 million. Early stage investments are between $1 to $3 million. And seed capital is anywhere ranging from 10 lakhs to 3 crores, 4 crores, 5 crores. Okay, so only when you are in late stage, people will start recognizing you. People will start calling you for webinars. People will start calling you for sharing your ideas and your growth path. And once you get into IPO, that's when you have stabilized in the marketplace. So the journey is not so easy. The financing cycle typically is the most important cycle, and it is not easy. It is not an easy path either. Okay. So let us recap what is needed for entrepreneurship. Okay, it need not be new area alone. It can be in an old area also. Driving taxis or ensuring that the taxi is served to you. It's not a new area, but it's an old area. But people have invented new way of doing it. It should serve some existing need or an unmet need, or improve convenience of people. It is extremely important. See, for example, opening a new salon, new hair cutting salon in an upcoming locality is a need which is not served. It's an unmet need for that locality. So is hair cutting a new business? No, it has been there for 2,000 years or 18 or at least 1,500 years. But it is an unmet need in that locality. As simple as that. You need an idea. Idea is green. Passion is within. That's why it is in red. Team is a teamwork. Okay, that's why it is in blue. It calls for harmony. It calls for coordination, and it calls for helping each other. And differentiation is in pink, because you have to differentiate. You have to appear different always. Appropriate positioning and pricing, and what you need is resilience. Resilience, emotional resilience is extremely important. You go through a lot of trust and this one. And finance is extremely important. This is what is needed for entrepreneurship in my view. Now, let us come to what is innovation. Innovation, all of us know. We need not discuss too much, but I'll just say what is not innovation, okay? And then we'll get into what is innovation. Innovation is not just an idea. Innovation is not just an imagination. Innovation is not just about vision. It is not just inspiration. It is just not analysis. It is not just motivation. It is not, drawing up a P&L. Okay, this is my expenses, this is my profit. It is not leadership. It is not about teamwork, but it is about an idea which has translated into a product and which is successful and which can grow. So market acceptance is extremely important for your idea. It is idea, vision, discovery, which has translated where you develop and translated into a market success. It is leveraging technology, but market acceptance is extremely important for your innovation. Okay, that doesn't mean that people who have left their research halfway through are not innovators, but ultimately it gets into a limelight in the commercial world only after market accepts it. It is extremely important. Okay, I mean, let us look at some of the innovations which have happened in the world. For example, internet happened in what is called as an ARPANET. Okay, where a computer scientist in 1963 felt that the computers can be networked for sharing of information, and that's how the concept of entire internet started. The GPS came, got its invention in the military. Quite a few inventions have come from military because necessity is the mother of invention. But nowadays it is changing to passion is the driver behind innovation. Graphical user interface, similarly. I'll leave this presentation with you. Similarly, feminine hygiene products, it were discovered during the World War times. Okay, frozen juice concentrate, because the lot of juice concentrate had to be supplied to World War soldiers. So they discovered how to come up with frozen juice, which can stand for a long life when it is supplied to the soldiers. I mean, we can go through a number of examples. Other examples like digital photography, okay, was discovered for the sake of spy satellites. Similarly, walkie-talkie, night vision cameras. I mean, aerosol bug spray, which we see, the duct tape, which we see, the super glue. Quite a few of them have come through even during World War times as well. I'm not talking about latest innovations. So innovation is all about translating a new idea into a product which can get market acceptance. So now let us go through what has new education policy done for promoting both education and innovation, innovation and startups. See, in innovation, you require multidisciplinary approach. You should have an equal amount of right brain as much as left brain. So they are trying to change the undergrad education to be multidisciplinary. That means I can be a physics major, but I can do electives in entrepreneurship. I can do a maths major, and I can do a course in economics and accounting. Earlier, it was not possible. So they are trying to make it multidisciplinary, and they are trying to make it, credit-based system. So if you are trying to do a physics major, you should do maybe 10, 12 courses in physics, but you will have flexibility to do 8 to 9 courses in arts, music, or economics, or accounting, and things like that. So that you have a little bit more well-rounded development. Okay. Ideally, it should be encouraged right from school days. In fact, Professor Kasturi Rangan, who is the chairman of the New Education Policy Committee, he started his work in 2017. Okay, he took the earlier work of earlier a gentleman called TSR Subramaniam. He was a former cabinet secretary. Okay, and Professor Kasturi Rangan is the ideal person to design education policy because he led one of the most innovative organizations in India, which is essentially ISRO, and he was the founding members in the ISRO. So he makes a statement. All of you should listen to his presentation. It is available in the YouTube. I sincerely suggest some of you listen to that presentation. He went on his own personally to 10 universities and advocated the new education policy in a big way. Okay, so that is the passion with which he drafted this policy. He said that the most people's brain forms by the age of 8. 86% of our brain is formed by the time of we are 8. So it is very important to nurture the brain from the age of 3 to 8 with good nutrition and multidisciplinary exposure. So he said that even school level, there should be a lot of extracurricular focus. And he has advocated a lot of extracurricular activities in the school education system. And it's not only advocating extracurricular activities, but also giving weightage to those activities. And he also suggested that the testing system at the age of, after the finishing of grade 11 and grade 12 should be modeled along the SAT lines, Okay, and he has advocated a called National Testing Agency, which should be the basic criteria for admission to undergrad and things like that, which is very good. And he also talks about focus on vocational education. Vocational education is what? See, everybody cannot be a scientist in physics or in computer science. Okay, you need good carpenters, you need good electricians, you need good, barbers, you need good, in every field which we see, because it is the electrician who comes to your house who can design a better electric socket compared to some physicist. So he focused on vocational education quite a bit in the policy. Okay, and he said it should be made part of the mainstream curriculum. And he said that they should get exposure to economics and accounting, because that is when they can build a better electrical shop or electrical business. The other day I was searching for a UPS, for my router. To my surprise, I thought that there will be at least 25. No, there is only one guy who manufactures UPS for routers. So because the router has a very specific requirement, like 12 volts and but high amperage. Okay, and there was no manufacturer. I was very surprised. There is a good opportunity there. If somebody can come up with a better, this router is being charged around 2,000 rupees actually. Sorry, this UPS. This UPS for router, if somebody can come up with a better product around 1,200 rupees, you will have a huge market. Imagine the Bangalore itself is a big market. Around about at least 50% of the people use routers, and they all need continuity in the router. So that's why UPS for router is a big example. I'm just telling as an example. Okay, there are billions of ideas, and the new education policy also focuses on research quite a bit. They have come up with what is called as the India Research Fund, a national research fund. They are going to allocate 20,000 crores to research fund, which is very good. If some of you want to pursue research in entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship models and things like that, I think if you come up with a nice paper, I'm sure there will be funding available for research in that space. And he has also said that let us classify universities. Today we have around about 1,000 universities in our country and 40,000 colleges. He said research has to be nurtured, and hence he said let us have only 100 to 150 research only universities, and then around about 1,500 to 2,000 which focus both on research and academics, and rest 15,000. He said that first 40,000 colleges have to be consolidated, because there are only unidimensional colleges and things like that. He said they have to be consolidated, and we should make it to 15,000 colleges which are multidisciplinary, and to promote undergraduate, because it comes from the undergraduate multidisciplinary focus. And China has this model. Okay, China has this model that they have consolidated, and they have made research only universities, and then research plus academics, and then 50% of the universities are focusing on occasional plus other multidisciplinary activities. And he said that we should go for global benchmarks, which is very correct. For occasional education, he said China and Germany should be benchmarks, which is true. Germany has a extremely very good vocational education. Similarly, for research, he said Israel should be the benchmark, which is extremely good again. Israel, as I told you, produces around about 800 research papers per lakh of population. He said for school education, USA should be the model, which is again true. In USA, they really focus on development of the child in a very holistic manner. Okay, so I think he has drafted a very good policy. I only hope that it gets implemented properly, in a very good way. So let's also focus on what could be the future organizations. The future organizations is why I'm focusing on this, because all what we talked about, entrepreneurship, innovation, startup ecosystem, education system, ultimately has to result in a healthy, large organizations which can provide a lot of jobs. Because everybody cannot be an entrepreneur. Even if everybody tries to be an entrepreneur, 9 out of 10 of them are going to face challenges. Okay, so large organizations are still going to be the bulwark of employment in India, because we have around about 1 crore of people entering workforce every year. So he said that the future organizations are going to compete. They are not going to compete on economies of scale, but they are going to compete on economies of learning. So learning, organizations have to learn. They have to learn, unlearn, and relearn, and again. And ecosystem will be ecosystem-based competition. You cannot compete only on, you should have an ecosystem. For example, if I'm producing a UPS, I should have a ecosystem which supplies PCBs at a very cost-effective price, which supplies resistors at a cost-effective price, which supplies nice manufacturing mold at a cost-effective price. So the ecosystem, why do you think the IT services has grown so large in India? Because the ecosystem developed. The number of universities, engineering colleges which can produce developed. The number of training institutes like NIIT and etc. came along. And a lot of other people also stepped up. The transport providers stepped up, the visa regulations stepped up, and the government of India stepped up quite a bit. They liberalized quite a bit. So as an ecosystem, we could compete, okay, in the global market. And you should have to compete on resilience. Resilience is going to be extremely important. It's a very new concept which is coming. That means, can you withstand yourself in adverse timings? For example, during the pandemic, some of the organizations which had good resilient characteristics could survive. Some of the guys who are always operating on kind of a trading kind of a mentality, they kind of faced tough times. Even a trader who had strong differentiation survived. So people will start competing on resilience a lot more. You'll have to compete on imagination, how much you can imagine it that your business can be or cannot be. You have to compete on a combination of human plus machine models, which is extremely important because future organizations, I'll just tell you one example. Today, we hardly have around about 8 robots per 10,000 people in Indian factories, whereas South Korea and other manufacturing advanced countries like China have around about 500 to 800 robots per 10,000 workers. So there is a difference. So their productivity is high, their precision is high. So the organizations will have to compete on combinations of human plus machine models. If I'm using a decision support system using AI, and if I'm the insurance service provider, and if I'm a fellow who is sitting in front of a customer, the moment I understand my customer profile, my AI will generate multiple options for me to customize my insurance policy for the customer. Okay, so the future organizations will have to compete on combinations of human. Not only you should have a good relationship with the customer, but your machine should help you to generate appropriate product for the customer. And your risk management will have to be across 4 dimensions. Risk is a very important, especially large organizations. Risk management is getting a lot of importance. You'll have to manage on 4 dimensions. One is technology, second is macroeconomic risk, third is socio and geopolitical risk, and planetary risk. Planetary risk is what? Climate change or epidemic kind of a thing and things like that. So you should not only compete on product and other things, you should compete on various things like ecosystem, resilience, imagination, economies of learning and things like that. And the design of organization has to change. The traditional organization theory will not work anymore. The leaders need to reinvent and create learning loops. You have to create learning loops within the organization. You have to, already we talked about machines and humans. From a mechanical process of growth, you have to get into a biological process of growth. What is mechanical process of growth? You have a manager, you have 10 reportees, and then 10 workers, blah, blah, blah. A very, very structured organization. But the biological process of growth is like a plant. Plant grows once environment is there, once it gets good manure. So you only provide the environment for all your employees to flourish on their own, so that your organization becomes a biological model of growth instead of mechanical process of growth. Mechanical process of growth is good for traditional models, okay, like a factory, yes. Whereas biological processes of growth is important for inventions and transformation capabilities and things like that. So you should create a culture of transformation, and that transformation capability should be repeatable in your organization. That is going to be important. The new scales are going to be not necessarily this one. The new scales are going to be, are you generating relevant data? Are you scaling in value every time? Are you scaling in learning? Are you scaling in quality of new ideas? These are going to be the new scales which are going to be measured. And then the ecosystem approach, which we talked about. So will it all come together? Yeah, provided all of us work together, okay? Many universities have to become multidisciplinary. We'll have to focus on internships. We'll have to focus on practical approach. Okay, we'll have to ensure that the startup ecosystem grows again and again. The incubators and accelerators are on the rise. Parents are encouraging multidisciplinary growth, especially in the Indian middle class, which is growing from 200 million to 500 million in the next 7 to 10 years. Okay, that will be the bulwark of the for the country. The defense is opening up for private sector participation in India. FDI is on the rise. Especially in the last 3-4 quarters, I don't know if you have seen, the amount of foreign direct investment in India is growing quite a bit. The policies are, shaping up for that, and venture capital is on the rise. Citizen needs are growing. Citizen expectations are growing. Indian digital economy, as I told you, is already expected to be $1 trillion. Okay, from a current base of $100 billion. Okay, globally there will be 420 billion transactions worth $7 trillion digitally. Will shift from cash to cards. Just digital payments alone, that is the kind of thing which is going to happen. And Karnataka has seen the highest adoption of digital payments in the entire country. So Karnataka has always been a pioneer and leader in innovation. That's why we had, of course, here the ecosystem was there. For example, Indian Institute of Science was there, and the large public sectors like ITI and BHEL and BEL came here, essentially because the weather was good, and hence all these public sector investments came in, and that led to rise of electronics industry, which in turn led to a rise of IT industry here. Even today, we command almost 35 to 40% of the IT sector business. Okay, so I would like to stop here. I already touched upon various things. I will just repeat myself. You should have 3 brains in future. One is learning, another is to unlearn and then relearn again and again. And I wish all of you see this video, the link I have put here, 10 motivational YouTube videos for entrepreneurs. Okay, you can copy this link, and when I share the presentation, you can use this. And I'll just close with the Alvin Toffler's saying that illiterate of 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So wishing you all bright, satisfying career and personal lives. And then I'll stop here and let us have an interactive session for the next 30-40 minutes. Thank you. I'm open for questions. Am I visible? The first question is always that. Hello.
Yeah. So thanks a lot, sir. This is Bharat.
Hi, Bharat. Hi, Professor.
Yeah, sir. Thanks a lot for giving our students a detailed insights about the innovation and entrepreneurship. Students, if you have any doubts, you can just question this, sir. So you would be a right person to clear all your doubts. Yes, students, if you have any doubts, you can just question the speaker.
Did I go very fast or did I go very slow? I really don't know.
No, sir. Actually, it was very good and fine.
Okay. I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first question is always difficult to come. I think somebody will have to take the small extra courage. I'm like you. I passed out at ordinary college. Okay, so I'm not any superhuman. I'm a simple middle class guy. Okay, I live in a rented house. So you can think that I'm your neighbor and ask me a question, please.
So may I?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. So it was really a very nice session. So being a associate professor in a traditional college, so we do face some difficulties, and students they don't come forward for innovation, even though we are acquainted, but students they are quite shy, and it is a financial crunch also. So can you suggest a model so that these students can be boosted for innovation and contribute for development with respect to rural India? Thank you, sir.
Okay. I think that's a very good question. I mean, all of us go through this. It's not only your students, Even when I passed out, obviously, my father had, one younger brother, and I mean, everyone has difficulties. So for me, the job was very important, right? For all of us, job is important. It is not such easy decision to become an entrepreneur at the age of 22, 23, 24. Okay. I think the first set of people who can venture are people who have the business in their family. Okay. People who come from business families, I think they will be the first set of people who can take the plunge easily, because they will be having their family business, but they should not start in the same shop what their father is doing, whether it is a restaurant or whether it is or a large factory and things like that. They should take seed capital from their parents or their friends and start something on their own. That is when they will learn the most and they will become the best. So I think that is what people who have traditional family businesses should do. And then the second set of people like me who are in need of a job, ideally what I suggest is that they get into a job, first 3-4 years, get exposed to the industry, preferably they join in sales. If they join in sales, what happens is they get exposed to the market a lot more compared to a guy who is in, say, traditional software or marketing. Marketing is also a desk job. To a certain extent, marketing is okay, but sales will be the best. Okay, they should join a traditional organization and join in sales. And don't join a large organization, join a mid-sized organization. Because if you join a mid-sized organization, you will be exposed to other aspects of the organization a lot more. For example, when I joined Wipro, I already had 7 years experience, but even then, at that time in IT services, it was a mid-sized organization. So we had to organize the trainings, we had to recruit the people, we had to train them, we had to speak to the customer, we had to manage the visa logistics, we had to take care of the personal HR needs of people. So you get exposed to end-to-end operations in the business. So it is very important that you join typically a sales function in a mid-sized organization and get exposed for the first 5 to 6 years. And then you'll also accumulate some savings. So take that savings, you have got exposed to various aspects of business, then start on your own. You become an entrepreneur at the age of 30, which is very good. Okay, that's what I would do if I'm from a middle class person. But if I'm a lot more passionate and if I have a great idea upfront, nothing wrong in borrowing money. Okay, borrow money and venture into it. Even if worst come worst, what happened, you will fail. Okay, but if your parents have the capacity to repay that loan, nothing wrong in it. I mean, things fail. Even the best of the most experienced people fail. So don't get disheartened with failure. There is nothing wrong in failing. Everybody fails. Even Mr. Modi will fail. Okay, don't think that Modi is not invincible. I mean, he got exposed in farmers' agitation, right? Because I mean, he thought that he has got majority in parliament and he can really push it through. He pushed through in parliament, but he underestimated the amount of reaction from Punjab and parts of Haryana. So every step will have some failures. Nothing wrong in failing. But at the same time, you should be conscious of the fact that your efforts have to be sincere and you should have the passion to pursue again. That is very important. I think if the people keep these three in mind, I think they'll be successful. Nothing wrong in it. It need not be in the new area. It need not be in hot technology. It can be in a traditional business domain. It can be in an incremental to the existing business domain. Or if you don't have all these facilities, nothing wrong in joining a mid-sized organization to get good exposure and then start after 6-7 years.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And always look for opportunities as to where the customers are not getting served properly. That is very important. Okay, if you can enhance the value to the customer, there is a new business idea straight away. What was there for delivery in the business? Tell me honestly. I don't know how many of you studied the model of a company called Delivery. Okay, so when Amazon and all these guys started in India, not Amazon, Big Basket and others, or even your Zomatos of the world, the biggest problem they were facing was that there used to be peak demand at some times and there used to be slack demand at some times. So delivering to various parts of the city was becoming a challenge. So Delivery came up with a model that I will have people in localities, various localities, and they will be used across organizations, across Zomato, across Big Basket, across things like that. So Delivery became a subcontractor, okay, for organizations like Zomato and Big Basket and others. So Delivery found a value proposition. So it brought the value of a localization along with centralization. That is what they picked on. Can I localize the delivery is what they picked on, and Delivery became an organization on its own. So things like that, okay? I mean, you see for shortcomings in the existing in the existing business domains and try to add value. That's a new business. Yes, sorry, somebody came online to ask a question. Please go ahead. Whoever was that gentleman? Hello? And people can feel free to share their videos. Nothing wrong in that. So that, we can all see each other.
So students, please do switch on your videos so that we can take a snap of it as well as for the documentation purpose. I request all the students to switch on their videos.
Hi, Nilima, please go ahead. I don't know if you are a faculty or a student, but either way I'm open. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, dear students, please do switch on the videos. Switch on your videos.
There is a grid view,
Sir, am I audible to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sir, what are the supports from the government side mainly for this entrepreneur? Are there any specific policies for them to help out to come with their own entrepreneurial skills?
Oh, excellent question. I think, it's a beautiful question. Government of India
because usually we have come and heard across the concept of women entrepreneurship. Mainly they focus on women's getting into the entrepreneurship, but not with, are there the same policy, means certain policies which is more focusing towards women upliftment or development?
No. I think, women entrepreneurship maybe, I think there is a equal encouragement by Government of India and state governments. They might have started 1 or 2 small schemes only for the sake of women, and they publicize it more, especially because so that they can get votes. So that's all. Otherwise, schemes per se are equally available. Okay. See, the MeitY and the state government has got a lot of schemes. Okay. You should go to their websites. Okay. I'm not able to list all of them available. For example, I know that because I'm participating in one MeitY program. I'm the lead mentor for all the fintech projects which are coming. What Ministry of MeitY is Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. Okay, so what they have done is they have come up with. Sorry, I don't know what is happening to my. Okay. Okay, Ministry of MeitY has come up with a scheme to, they are partnering with a lot of accelerators, okay? Because how can they give funds directly to people? It is difficult, right? So what they're doing is they have partnered with a lot of third-party accelerators who are already there in the market. So they have evaluated them, they have shortlisted them, and they have told those accelerators and incubators to select the startups, okay? You kind of screen, for example, today, I have to look at some 200 companies who have submitted their proposals, and I have to shortlist 10 out of them. And once I shortlist 10 out of them, okay, we will take them through what is called as a cohort program. In the sense, we help them, nurture them. Okay, if they are doing some market analysis, we give them a lot of ideas. And once we nurture them, and if we find that they are progressing well, then we are recommending to the government of India to allot 50 lakhs, 60 lakhs, 70 lakhs, or 25 lakhs, depending upon the need of the organization. Similarly, SIDBI has a scheme, Small Industries Development Bank of India. Okay, Government of Karnataka has a scheme. Okay, Government of Andhra also has a scheme. They are partnering with educational institutions to promote entrepreneurship. So there are a lot of schemes available. So please go through Government of Karnataka. You Google, a lot of these details are available on Google. You should just find out and apply to the relevant program. That's all.
Okay, sir. Students, if you have any doubts, please do question it.
Okay, if people don't have any questions, we can close the session. Okay, thank you all. And I will share the presentation with Professor Bharat. Okay, and they can take it and then they can circulate it if they need. There are some slides which I have taken from NASSCOM, and don't mutilate those slides or do any damage to those slides. They have to be used as they are, and you have to quote the source always when you use those slides. Okay. You have to quote though it is in public domain, if you don't quote the source, it is copyright violation. Okay. So I will send you this and then you can use it.
Okay, sir. Sir,
Okay.
Thanks a lot for educating our students regarding entrepreneurship and innovations. Basically, you started the session with learning. So learning is a lifelong process. It's continuously an individual should learn through his life continuously till the end of his last breath. That was a beautiful quote where you started with the session, and you gave a lot of insights regarding the new hubs coming up for the entrepreneurships. Then what are the challenges, and when it comes to financing cycle, then how innovations works out. So, and later part of that, you spoke about the education policy, multidisciplinary approaches. So thanks a lot for giving us the insight about all these things, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.